You will require Unity, the free version will be sufficient, and access to the Vuforia SDK, which we'll go into more detail about in the next video. It would also be useful for future development videos to have an Android or iOS enabled device. Thank you. Hello and welcome to a Unity overview video. So today we're going to be looking at what makes up Unity and getting started with the augmented reality tutorial series. So when you first open up Unity, you will be greeted with a screen very similar to this. You may have to sign in and create an account, but that is free to do. So first thing we need to do is click on this button up here that says New. You'll also notice up here there's a Learn button, so if you actually want to know more about Unity, there are some online tutorial guides and sample applications that you can learn in your own free time. So first thing we need to do is give our project a name. So I'm just going to call this AR Workshop 1, let's say. I want it to be a 3D package because we'll be working with 3D assets. We're not going to add an asset package yet, but we will do in future videos, and I'll show you how to do that later on. So the next step we need to press is the Create Power Object. Just wait for this to open up. And you'll be greeted with a screen very similar to this. If you're using the free version, as I'm using on this computer here, which is known as the personal version, you'll have a light grey colour scheme. If it is you're using the Plus or Pro version, you'll be using a dark colour screen. The differences between the two is with the Pro or Plus version, you can basically work in teams, have access to online analytics, and also have a customized splash screen and not have to have the Made with Unity logo at the beginning of your application. Other than that, they are basically the same, and you've got access to all the functionality in all versions. So now an overview of the interface. In this top corner here, we have our hierarchy. This is where it lists everything that was within our scene. So here we have our main camera and directional light, which is created by default when we create itself a default scene called Untitled in this occasion. So if I want to add anything else, I can right click in this area here and I can add extra objects. So I'm going to right click and create a cube. And as you see, it adds it to our scene at 0, 0, 0. So that's the hierarchical view. If I want to quickly select something, I can click on it there, and if I want to quickly zoom to it, I can double click it. Like so. Next up, I'm going to go talk about these little tools at the top. So first off, we have the hand tool, which when selected, gives us a hand icon in our scene view, which we can click and hold with our left mouse button to move around. Scroll to zoom in and out. Right click and hold and pan around, which gives us a little icon. If we also hold right click and WASD, we can move around the scene, like so. Next to hand, we have our move icon, which when we select an object gives us this little transform axis. If I want to move things along the x-axis, which is the red arrow, I can simply click and move and hold it, and as you see up here, our value changes. Same with the z-axis and the y-axis. Next to that, we have our rotate button, which we can rotate on any of the axes. As again, you can see up here, it changes our values as I rotate this cube around, just randomly, like so. If I ever want to return these or manually enter a value, I can just manually type it into these fields here, like so. So I'll reset that back to normal now. Next to that, we have our little scale tool, which we can click and drag, so we can drag on the Y, we can drag on the X and the Z. If we click and drag in the white, it scales everything in proportion to each other. So I'm just going to reset that back to 111 for now. Next to that we have this little box icon. This basically allows you to drag things along a 2D plane essentially. This is more useful for UI elements, so I'm not really going to be using that much today. Next we have the Move All icon, which is a new icon in the newer versions of Unity, where we've got access to all the tools in one go. So there we go. Let's just reset that back to default, which is with Control Z a couple of times. Now we go into our scene view. So here we have the view that we see whilst we're building. If we click the drop down here where it says shaded, we can change to various different views, such as wireframe, which shows us the polygonal build-up of the models, shaded wireframe, etc, 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 illumination levels, and whatnot. Next to that we have the toggle 2D option, which if clicked toggles our camera into a 2D perspective. This is great if you're working on a canvas. So if I was to right click here and add a UI element with an image, zoom out, zoom, 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 zoom. So you see here this white box here is our canvas, this is our user interface, and this white square here is our image, which we could replace the sprite with, which we will look into in future videos, but today I'll just delete that. I can just click on it up here and press delete on the keyboard and press the 2D button to go back to 3D view. This little sun here is our lighting, so if that's turned off, lighting isn't basically shown. If I click it again, you see now got shadow again. Next is toggle sound on and off. We can actually toggle on and off various views such as skybox, flares, animated materials, image effects. These are more system heavy effects really. Next to that we have gizmos where we can toggle on and off icons. The next view up here we have is our game view. This is the view that we see with our camera in the scene. So when you create a new scene, by default it creates a camera for you. So this is our camera view in the game, let's say. Which you can also see down here when you've got your camera selected. And the third panel is our asset store. This is where we have access to an online repository of materials which we can pay for or download for free. There are free stuff out there, let's just say. And in fact, one thing we will want to do is actually download the Vuforia course samples, which is now available on the asset store in the new versions of Unity. This is a recent change, so you can actually download that, and once it's downloaded it'll be added to your downloads library, like so. And once it's downloaded you can press import and it will add it to your project asset folders down here, which I'll get to in a second. So the next view we have is our inspector view here. So with an object selected, it shows us all the parameters for that object. So here we have the material that's applied to this, the collider, the transform options. If I was to go to the camera, we have camera tools, so we can change whether we have a solid colour as the background, or a skybox, a depth, or don't clear, etc. We're not going to play with that too much today, but there's a lot you can do with that. We have also down here, up here we have the tag command, where we can basically tag things in, which means we can group things together by tags, and with code affect everything with the associated tag name that we define. And layer works similarly, except layers are more specialist in a sense. These can actually be toggled on or off by camera, so the camera can actually disable certain layers if we don't want it to show them. Up here we have our play button, so if we wanted to play our game or application we can press that and it will launch it up. As you see there's nothing going on at the moment because it's just the camera pointing at a box. We can pause it and we can step. So if we had a stepped animations, we could press that to progress along one, as it were. Down here we have our project command. So down here is where we have our assets. So if I want to import assets, I can right click, import. Let's get just a picture of this, and it adds it to our asset folder. Best practice is to create folders and appropriately label things. So I would put all images into one file. I'd put all models into another, sound, etc., and split it up that way. It just makes for tidy housekeeping. The next tab to that is our console. This is where all our errors will be shown. Hopefully we won't have too many of those as we go through the workshop series. Next up we have is our animation tool. So if we have an object selected, we can actually create an animation for it. If there isn't an animator or animation clip associated with it, we can press this create button here, give it a name. So I'm going to call this rotate. And if we was to click, let's say add property, we have all the properties here, which are also listed here. So if we go to transform and we press the plus button on rotation and scrub our timeline up to like 30 seconds, press the little red button to start recording. So any action that we now do will be recorded as a keyframe on our timeline. Same as how After Effects works, the transition between one keyframe and the next is tweened. So if I rotate that, let's say like that, and I was to press play, it will loop indefinitely that animation, like so. If I want to change the frame rate, or the speed rather, at the moment it's defaults to 60, which is 1 second. But if I want to slow that down, I can go to 30, half it. So that will give us 2 seconds, and so on and so on. And obviously our animation speed changes in regards to that. Next up we have is our toolbar here. So we have file, so we can add new scene. So if we want to make additional scenes, I'm not going to save this, we can press file, new scene, and it again adds default camera directional light, which we won't want for the workshop series. So we'll go through that when we get into the meat and bones of it, as it were. We can save the project, which is something important to do. If we go here to build settings, this is where we have options for all of our platforms. Again, this may look different on yours, depending if you're using the Plus, the Pro, or the Free. I'm using a beta version of the new Unity at the moment, because there's an update just recently coming out at the time of recording this. So this is why I'm using the free version at the moment, not the Plus that I normally use. So if I want to switch platform, I can click on Android, switch platform. It will re-import my assets, and now up here it will now read as an Android executable with the all Unity icon there. I can add this scene, so let's say call this test, and this scene that I'm currently got here is now added into our build. This works in a hierarchical system, so whatever's first as our scene is the first to load in, and we'd have to manually put in a control like a button to switch between scenes. If I go to player settings, and up here we have our resolution, so this is how it's displayed on our screen. The portrait landscape, so if we allow various orientations. Icon, we can set an icon for the application, a product name for the application, so that's why it's called on your phone or device. The company name is for if you use to publish this onto the app stores. Splash screen, with the free version you can't toggle off the Made with Unity logo at the beginning, but if you have the Plus or Pro you can remove that or add your own. And you can add various logos as well. Other settings is where we need to create a package name, so we would want to ideally keep the same convention of .com, .whatever in there. We can set our API level. This is mainly for Android, but iOS is very similar to this. Most of the other settings we can pretty much keep the same. Publish settings, again, this is if you put it onto the app stores, you will require a unique identifying app key. XR settings, this is brand new. And this is something that wasn't here up until the more recent versions and the beta versions at the moment. So you'll notice in the old, when we used to do this, this Vuforia settings and Tango and virtual reality settings weren't a thing. You had to add these on top. Now these are natively built into the actual Unity package. So if I click the Vuforia augmented reality supported there, it says, do I want to accept these terms and conditions? I'll accept those for now. And it adds us a folder called resources, which has got a Vuforia config. Now, the Vuforia config is what we will require for basically when we get to the AR stuff in the future sessions. So we'll go through this in more detail at that point. I'll just go back to our player settings for a second. Tango is what you use for if you want your phone to track plane-based AR at the moment, such as the AR core. And the virtual reality support is more for Google Cardboard and basically Android versions of VR really at this level. So yeah. Next to that we have edit, where we can edit the preferences for our settings, project settings, names, etc, etc. We don't really want to go too much into that, but you can basically mess about with this in your own free time. Just the keys, colors, external tools. You'll see with Android I have to add in manually the SDKs, so you will have to download. There's plenty of online guides for that. So I'm not going to bore you about that now, and this does change every so often. But basically you need to link it to the SDK for your Android if you're using Android. iOS is a slightly different, I would like to show you, but I'm on a Windows computer at the moment, and you can't actually make iOS apps on a Windows computer. And yeah, but you do need basically a provisional profile, which is not free. You can make a development license for free, but you can't actually export it unless you pay for an Apple developer license. Next up we have game objects, which works the same as if we was to right click here. So you see here, because we've got Vuforia now inbuilt, we've got all these prefabs as an option there. So if I was to click on AR camera, Vuforia requires some assets to be imported, I'll import them. When it imports these packages, it will actually add extra assets down here, you see. So if I see here, we've now got an AR camera. We can remove that. But again, we'll go through this when we actually go through the development stage. This is just an overview, really. In component, again, we have various options. These are the components that where if we was to click on here, and these are basically what these are here. Components are like effects or additional scripts. If you want to make your own script, you can go to new script and you can create a C# script. You used to be able to also create JavaScript, but I think that's been phased out slowly. Yeah. Next we have window. So if your window view does not look like this, we can actually reset the layout. We also have the options for Vuforia config, so we can adjust all our Vuforia settings when we get to that stage. And all the other little windows and such, and then help where we can update it, manage our licenses, report bugs, etc, etc. So yeah, what you want to do often is save your scenes, save your project, build and run when, if you've got your mobile device plugged in and it's set up to allow it. Otherwise, for the purposes of workshops, we will actually be keeping it in PC and Mac standalone just to test out, and using the webcam inbuilt on the computer to test the markers. So yep, that's basically a very quick overview of the Unity application and how it's laid out and works. So if you have any questions, please let me know, and I will see you next time. Goodbye.